We have had a client for many years at Eastman Kodak by the name of Dr. Joseph Bailey. He was in charge of what they call the MEC, Marketing Education Center. He was some 14 years with the University of Texas, and he's a giant in terms of education. And he said some things that you've seen since, but he was the generator of most of this data, or proved it. He said that only about 10% of what goes in through our hearing is retained beyond 72 hours for what he called functional use. Now that ought to be pretty scary to you, because just think of what your job is, whether it's service or sales, and I think incidentally those of you in service are also salespeople. Maybe they sell it, you keep it sold, you sell a second one, a third one, and on and on. Not to mention service contracts, etc. So I'm going to treat the whole group as though you need to be persuasive communicators. I'll split you out because I think you have some different needs, but generally the concepts will be the same. But just imagine the problem behind this. Here we are, our major communication tool being the spoken word, and relatively little of it is retained for what's called functional use. Now, functional use doesn't mean broad general concept. Like, you know broad general concept, you get in a car and you go, right? Even a 2-year-old can tell you that. Functional information is, how do you get it started? How do you get it going? For an example, you sit down, put the key in the ignition, you turn it till it starts, you take the, if it's automatic, put it in D, press the accelerator. That's detailed information. That's the functional information we're talking about. 10% of that gets retained normally. Now, if that were true, the next 3 days would be a bad deal for you. I mean, to sit here and hopefully only absorb 10% of it. Well, Bailey's data goes further. He says that the eyeballs are more effective ingester of information. Somewhere up around 33 to 35% of what we see stays in there. So, you know, all the printed material you put out, the letters that you follow up with, the brochures that marketing puts together, has value. Now, let's synergize those two, and they can be. If you both see and hear, and we'll talk more about the multi-sensory approaches in a little while, you both see and hear, they think you can jump up into the 60% plus area. So say it, show it, one way or another. We'll talk about ways to do that in a project tomorrow morning. That's not bad, but that's not the optimal goal. And this is where Bailey made his breakthrough. What Bailey really discovered is if in fact you have a hands-on, or you go into what is called the do mode, you can retain up to 92+% of information. You've all heard that as hands-on or whatever. We got a new fax machine in our office recently, and you know, sure, we can read the instructions, but the woman that brought it in was very clever. You know, she went through it, and then she made each one of us going to operate it, sit down and operate it ourselves. I can read instructions until I go blue in the face. It's not going to be near as important as that 3 minutes she gave me and hands-on. Now, how do you, what happens in this do mode? Well, what we generally think is that we break through what is called the preoccupation barrier. It doesn't have a lot to do with just the fact that you had to do it. It has a lot to do with while you're doing it, you can't hide psychologically, because the truth of the matter is there is a thing that we all go through, which is kind of a mental coffee break. We can drift off. It's a subconscious mode. And that's where Bailey, I think, cleaned this whole thing up. So let me just give you his graph. He calls this 24 hours. And if you decide to go downtown this week, you don't have to do it quite like this, but generally we sleep over here and we're awake over here. Now, sitting on top of that system is another system. Over here is called the subconscious. 100% of our sleep time is in the subconscious. Now, this gets tricky, so remember that. 100% of our sleep time is in the subconscious. And, of course, we have the conscious mode. 100% of the time we're conscious, we're awake. But we don't fill all the awake time with that. And you know that, so do I. There's a band here where we are both subconscious and awake. Except what's born with that's daydreaming. I manifest that a lot of different ways. When I drive a car, seriously, I got stopped in Illinois a few years ago by a state trooper, and he was pissed. He was insane. He said, "You cannot drive a car and read a map in the state of Illinois at the same time." I had a map out over steering wheel. And I have terminal smartassism. So what I said to him was, can you do that in very many other states? I got the ticket, and I deserved the ticket. But the point is, what he was saying to me is, you know, you need your conscious mind in this driving, except on the way here this morning, I drove past my exit to my office, which is Cumberland North. The car wanted to get off. And I'm not so sure on certain days I wouldn't have got off there this morning. I said, oh, shit, I got to go further out to Arlington. Any of you ever done that? Drive right past the exit, or get off on an exit that you normally get off at, you don't want to get off at today? Okay. Now, let's just follow this out. I really want to prove this to you. How many of you have ever been married? They say married, nobody raised their hand, ever, including now. Okay, good. Your husband or your wife ever accused you of not listening while they were talking? Now, Chris, if the next answer you give me tells me your real character, is he ever right?
Yeah.
Sure, okay. How many of you have small children? Anybody? Okay, we do it to our kids. I used to walk in when my kids were small from an out-of-town trip, and Daddy, 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 you know. I had 18 inches of mail on my damn desk. I'm talking, chattering away with little Mike, 6 years old, 7 years old. Then after dinner, it's, let's go. Go where? You promised. You know, my wife said, you bastard, you promised. I think they had a conspiracy, but I must have made some promises that I didn't really hear, okay? Now, let me just show you how close to where you live this can happen. Anyone in the room type the right way, not the way I type, the real way, the way you would have learned in school? Can you do? Anybody else? Now, get your egos out of the way. I'm looking for the fastest typer in the room. How fast are you? Okay, Pete, did you take typing in high school?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Hold out your right hand. Look at the little finger. It's responsible for 17 functions on the standard electric typewriter. Quickly give them to us. Don't hesitate now.
P-O.
Stop. I don't want to make you feel bad. I look for the fastest typer in the room because those are the people that usually can't do it very well. It's somebody that does 9 words a minute with no mistakes that'll probably figure them out. Why couldn't he do that? Subconscious, yeah. See, a long time ago you learned in class, and you're not old enough to do this, but when I went to high school, somebody came in mid-semester and put rubber caps on their keys. Can you believe that? In mid-semester. What the instructors really knew is that we had to stop looking at the damn keys. So they put these. Now, I always thought to myself, someday when I get old and want to retire, what a job. Coming in mid-semester, capping the keys in the typewriter class. Seasonal work, but, you know, easy. No. But the point is, what the instructor was saying to us that day is real simple. Don't look at the keys anymore. You remember you had to look over here? He or she was saying, take it out of your conscious mind and put it back in your subconscious mind. Long before they had discovered that this mode existed, subconscious and awake, they taught us to do things here. Have you ever worked in a factory doing assembly work? Some of you? Okay, I did when I went to. You weren't good until you stopped thinking about it. Right? And, of course, what you were really doing is thinking about it at a different level. Now, here comes the real problem. This mode is driven by, I think, our social system where we get busier and busier and busy. For example, do you sometimes feel like you have to do more than one thing at a time? Sure. I'm very often flying in an airplane and doing work. I'm very often opening mail and on a phone at the same time. I'm very often talking to Mrs. Riga and thinking about the 18 inches of mail and all the rest of it. That's the way life is. Driving a car and thinking about the meeting or the customer or whatever. They discovered a few years ago 2 things. One is that you cannot do 2 things at the same time with your conscious mind. Hence, when you're doing 2 things, one of them you're doing in this part of your mind, like when you type. They also discovered that information does not find its way to memory unless it comes through the conscious mind. Now, I can prove that to you. You're going to find out in a little while what a wonderful speller I am. A few years ago, I came across a concept called Learn While You Sleep. Bill, you're old enough to remember that. Do you remember it? Heard of it.
Father told me about it.
Father told you about bullshit. Now, Learn While You Sleep worked like this. It's relatively old. Somebody came up with the idea of, why not ingest this information in your subconscious mind while you sleep? Great idea. So I thought to myself, God, Sister Marie Rage is going to be so happy with me. I'm finally going to learn how to spell. So I bought the program, the 125 most commonly misspelled words in the English language, and here's what you did. Put it in a tape recorder, you had a little pillow speaker, a little hole in the top, put it under your pillow, and at just the level where you could barely hear it, you went to sleep on it. The theory was you learned the spelling while you were sleeping. Now, to prove it, you're supposed to get up in the morning and take the test. I got one right, the one I heard before I fell asleep. Because what they really discovered here is that when we're in this subconscious mode, doing things subconsciously, talking to our husbands or our wives or our kids or whatever, nothing comes into memory. Now that's a problem you and I have. You're out there trying to communicate to a customer. If that customer drifts off into this area, and they haven't heard what we want them to hear, I don't care how bloody persuasive you are, if they didn't hear it, it doesn't count. You know? So I want to translate that to this class. I don't care how good I think this class is and how good you may even think it is in 3 days. If you don't hear parts of it, it's not going to fly. So among the things I'm going to do is, A, keep you out of this section, and B, teach you how to keep other people out of this section tomorrow. So I want you to expand the course. This wide it's persuasive communications. This wide it includes effective communication. And there's a danger there. Here's a danger. George, you may walk out of here Thursday afternoon and say, hey, that guy only had about one thing right for 3 days. So now my job is to be effective. That's your job. So I want a persuasive on me. So I want it to be effective as well as persuasive. With that thought in mind, I'm going to ask you when I ask you to take your pen in hand and fill in the blanks. It's not a rote assignment. I'm going to give you one other piece of payoff advice for your business life. If this is really true, this retention stuff, the next business meeting you go into, no matter what it is, you take notes. Even if you're like me and you can't read your notes afterwards, it doesn't matter. Even at the end of the session, you get an ashtray and you burn your notes in front of your customer, it doesn't matter. The very act of physically taking the notes kept you in the conscious state. You got a better chance of retaining the information. So small payoff to the concept.